And host of ShipShape TV, John Grabiscus.
Well, thanks, Buck. The first thing that I'd like to do today is introduce you to our first guest, who we have the privilege of having on the program as an expert in the field of marine hose. His name is Nelson Reinhardt, and he's with a firm called Hydraulic Supply Company, which is headquartered down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now, just a little bit farther down the dock, he has an incredible display of all different types of fuel line and different types of marine hoses. So let's take a little walk in order to find out a little bit more about this very oftentimes overlooked subject. Hello, Nelson.
John, how you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for coming by.
Nice to see you.
You know, I was bragging. We're bragging about you to everybody.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate you bringing some of this marine hose. Now, I was showing everybody some fuel line. Okay, this is some 5/8 fuel line that we had. It's made by Aeroquip, and it was built way back in 1979, and it still held fuel without leaking. It's close, okay? We're getting close. We did replace this line. We didn't want to get into the waterway and possibly have a spill. Why does it break down? I was telling everybody about heat. Well, where is the heat being generated on our boat?
You got a couple of monsters, 840 horsepower each, generating tons of heat. Okay, heat's the #1 enemy of this type of hose.
Let's talk about players in fuel hose. And I know you got some different categories here. I mean, we're a commercial craft. We're going to be taking customers out all over the world in search of big marlin or sailfish. And the Coast Guard mandates a little stricter kind of regulations on us than it would traditional pleasure craft. But I want to talk about both because there are a lot of people out there with pleasure craft, there are a lot of people out there with commercial craft. In fuel line, how much stricter or what type of fuel line do we need to use here?
Okay, the Coast Guard recognizes only hoses listed in a technical bulletin, J 1942. They are type A1, A meaning a fire test. This has to withstand a 2.5-minute open flame fire test without failing, without odor, without fuel leaking out.
Okay, also with commercial craft, the Coast Guard mandates that you have to put on special fittings.
Correct.
These fittings have to be able to be removed and reusable so that if you ever had a gash or a cut or something like that,
you can go out in the ocean and replace this hose if you carry spare hose and have the same connections available.
Okay, now this is a little bit more expensive than hose for pleasure craft, but let's talk about some traditional marine fuel hose with pleasure craft. You have type A fuel hose, you have type B fuel hose. What type of a boat would use type A, which is this right here, fuel hose?
All the type A hose is used for inboard and inboard-outboard engines. And again, remember, the type A does have the resistance to the 2.5 burn test.
Okay. Where would you use type B fuel hose?
Type B fuel hose is only used in outboard applications and with restrictions. You can't go over 7 foot in length.
Let's talk about some hydraulic hose because we have hydraulic steering on the Monterey going up through the tower. I see that we have some hydraulic lines right here.
We do.
And how is a hydraulic hose different than a fuel hose?
The biggest difference is you don't have to worry about the permeation of odor, but you do have to worry about withholding pressure. You have to withstand the pressures in the hydraulic systems. For instance, this particular hose, and it's on the ley line, this particular hose is rated for 3125 psi. Okay,
that's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Now, the other things that they offer in it are tough coat resistant covers for abrasion resistance, and this particular one is made with half SAE bend radius, so you can really put these in tight areas.
And when you're going up through a tower, okay, or through a leg or something like that, it is going to be required to go through some radius turns. You know, we were talking about permeability and permeation and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of leads us to sanitation hose. And I see that we have some sanitation hose here. Kind of a real negative, okay, is when you have this toilet and this holding tank stinking, okay? And y'all know what we're talking about here.
The odor.
Why do we smell this coming through a traditional type of sanitation hose?
Typically, the sanitation hose were made out of a plastic compound, and they do allow that permeation to come through after a short period of time. So we have some really exciting new products that were developed and just released this year.
Okay.
Trident Rubber, who's the manufacturer of this premium hose, was able to come up with a compound to make this a premium white hose. Now, what they do with this is they fill it, and you can use your imagination with what they fill it with, and cap it. And the test has to last a year with no odor permeation. And this hose withstands it.
That's huge.
Oh, it's big.
What I want to do right now, okay, Nelson, is let's take another timeout, but keep it right here because when we come back, we're going to show you how hose gets made. We're also going to show you what's involved in replacing some fuel lines on the Monterey. We'll cover it right after this.